just give me a second.
Yes, we can hear you, Geoffrey.
Okay, great. So my name is Geoffrey Sajjabi. Ronald keeps saying Godfrey. Okay. The name is Geoffrey.
My apologies.
You are forgiven. You're totally forgiven. But I know that one of my colleagues, Apollo, is on this call as well. Apollo leads our financial literacy team. So if there are any specific questions that fall in that line, Apollo and the rest of his team should be in place to help us answer. But I'm glad this morning, and I appreciate the fact that you've extended an invite to NSSF to interact with our members and potential members. I would like to make this as interactive as possible, so hopefully I can, say a few things in a few minutes, and so then we'll create more time for questions. I've resisted the temptation of having to share a presentation, but do prefer that we simply go through key areas that I thought are extremely important, especially for entrepreneurs in regard to compliance with NSSF. Now, NSSF draws its mandate from the NSSF Act as amended. In January 2022, the President assented to the bill, and so it became law. And as a result of that, there are quite a number of changes that took effect. And these changes have got implications on how we run our businesses, and therefore it's extremely important that we get to know what sort of implications these new provisions have on our businesses and how we can best comply. But before I go into the details of the changes in the law, I would like just to speak about our business model. I can see my colleague Apollo has actually been able to share. So Apollo, you can just move to the second slide on the business model, so we can briefly go through that. Now, in terms of our business model, our mandate is almost threefold. We register eligible employers and members. We collect contributions from them. We invest the contribution that we've been able to collect. But most important, at the end of the day, as and when members qualify, we process and pay benefits. So that really summarizes the mandate of the fund. Apollo, just move to that slide on the business model. So that's basically our mandate. Now, in terms of employers, until January last year, for an employer to register with the fund for the purpose of contributing for their employees, you needed to be employing at least 5 people. That meant that all entities that were employing less than 5 people did not have to comply as a mandatory requirement. Of course, that's now changed. Today, all employers, regardless of the number of employees that you have, you are required to register and contribute for the workers that you employ. Then in terms of members, individuals, we take members from the ages of 16 to 55. Beyond the 55 years of age, it also becomes voluntary. So an employer and an own to continue contributing to the fund even beyond the age of 55. But we also have a segment for voluntary members. We've got individuals that are not necessarily required under the law to contribute to the fund, but have got an opportunity to voluntarily join the fund and contribute on their own terms. We collect contributions. An employer is required under the law to deduct 5% from the total pay of the employee, the salary, the gross pay. So you deduct 5%, but the employer adds 10%, meaning that on a monthly basis, you contribute 15% of the gross pay of an employee. So that's what we call the standard contribution. But we also have what we call special contributions that are payable in respect of what we call non-resident employees. So if you are employing a non-Ugandan on a contract that is not exceeding 3 years, is ordinarily termed as a non-resident employee, and you are required under the law to contribute a special contribution in regard to that person of 10%. We also have interest obligations. So basically, Apollo, I'm told your slides are not moving. You're still on the very first So if you could move the slides, please. Apollo, you. Yeah.
So, sorry.
Okay,
Mukasa is moving the slides. Ronald, kindly assist.
already we are on slide 2. That's talking about the business model.
Okay, right. That one. I see.
Okay, but I can continue even as we move that.
Yeah.
The money that we collect is invested, and when we undertake investments, the sole aim is to generate income. Now, this income is used for largely 2 purposes. Number one is that we use it to pay interest to the members. Every year we declare interest, and that interest is payable to the members. The other bit of use for that income is basically to meet the running costs of the fund. Okay, but you notice from the figures that more than 85% or even higher of the income that we pay back to members in form of interest. But there are also penalties that govern late payments, and I think I'll speak about this later. Let me not go into them now. Investments. We invest largely in 3 areas. Okay, we invest in what we call fixed income. Now, fixed income takes the largest chunk of investments by the fund. Fixed income is largely to do with government bonds. So we've invested in government bonds in Uganda, in Kenya, in Tanzania, and in Rwanda. Government bonds are basically your safest type of investment that any pension scheme can undertake, because you're absolutely sure that this is a sovereign debt that is taken by government through the central bank, and as and when your maturity occurs, the government will basically pay you. The question would be, why do you take more than 70% of the money and put it in a government bond? Our biggest guidance in terms of investments is number one, on safety. So even before we think of the return, we're looking at safety. So how safe is the money when it is actually invested? So if an investment is going to promise us a return of 90%, but it's also extremely risky to the extent that there is a very high likelihood of losing people's money, you'd rather not undertake that investment and undertake one that will give you 14%, 18%, provided it meets the criteria of safety. So that explains why the biggest chunk of money is invested in government bonds, in what we are calling fixed income. The second area where we invest is in equities. Now, equities, you basically speaking, shares. The fund has invested in most of the listed companies in Uganda and within the region. You could easily argue that over 80% of listed companies in this country have got an investment by the fund. Within Uganda, you've got companies like Stanbic Bank, where the fund is a shareholder, Equity, KCB Bank, Serena Hotel, Housing Finance Bank. Some of these are not listed. They are what you call private equity. We also invested in DFCU Bank. We've got shareholding in Umeme, and so many other companies on the stock exchange in Uganda. But we've also largely invested in Kenya on the Nairobi Stock Exchange, in companies like Safaricom. Okay, we've also invested quite some money in Tanzania and in Rwanda. Now, in terms of equities, the biggest portion is actually invested in Nairobi, for the reason that their market is more vibrant. There are more listed companies. There is a lot more activity on the Nairobi market than it is on the one of Uganda. So that explains why the biggest chunk of investments in equities is actually held in Nairobi. The last area where the fund invests today is real estate. Real estate, despite being the one that would create more news and controversies, is where we've got the least amount. Only 8% of the over 18.5 T that we hold today is invested in real estate. Of course, largely in land that we're trying to develop now, and in a number of buildings like Workers House, Pension Tower that is coming up, Ginger City House in Barara, We're also building in Mbale, and we're undertaking the same in Gulu. And we've also others in Mbuya that have been now sold. We're doing some others in Chanja. We've done some others in Lubowa. We're currently constructing houses in Temangalo. So those just are some of the examples of the investments that we've undertaken in real estate. So that is in as far as investments are concerned. The other key mandate of the fund is to process and pay benefits to members as and when they qualify. And I've just tried to list the current benefits that we pay. So these are the conditions under which a member of the fund can gain access to their savings. And these include the changes that were brought about by the law. The very first benefit that is payable today is what we call the age benefit. Age benefit is payable to a member of the fund who makes 55 years of age, regardless of whether you're still employed or not. The condition is that a member has made 55 years of age. Even if you're still in active employment, you qualify to access your savings. About 40% of the benefits that we pay today are actually paid in age benefit. The second category is what we call the mid-term benefit. This one is, I think, the most popular, given the amount of coverage that it garnered last year. Mid-term has got two categories. One is that if a member of the fund makes 45 years of age and has made contributions for at least 10 years, that member would be eligible to access 20% of their savings. Okay. The second category under mid-term is to do with persons living with disabilities. So if a PWD who is 40 years of age, okay, and has contributed for 10 years, they would be eligible to access 50% of their savings. So the difference is in the percentage. While for the rest of the members with access 20%, a PWD would access up to 50%. Mid-term benefit, despite being the recent benefit, is now number 2 on the list. So 22% of the people that we paid in the last 1 year are people that have picked their money under mid-term benefit. We paid over 600 billion in this particular benefit. The other benefit is what we call exempted employment. So if you left the private sector today and joined government or joined any organization that is exempted from contributing to NSSF, then you become eligible to access your savings. The best example for who have joined the government, public service, we know that these are permanent and pensionable. They've got an alternative pension scheme that is run by the government of Uganda that caters for them. But we've got also people that join institutions like the UN, like the World Bank, like the IMF, like the East African Development Bank. These institutions are run pension schemes that are recognized by our laws here. And therefore, when you join them and you want to access your savings, you can access your money. The other condition is what we call invalidity benefit. So if a member of the fund is unable to continue working for medical reasons, okay, regardless of your age, you'll be eligible to access your savings on medical grounds. We subject you to a medical test by our own fund doctors. And if they find that the condition that you suffer is of the nature that you would not ordinarily be able to continue working, then you'll be able to gain access to your savings. We've got what we call withdrawal benefits. So if you make 50 years of age, but you're out of gainful employment, you also qualify to withdraw your money from the fund. This is different from the earlier age benefit of 55. This one, I am 50 years of age, but I'm out of gainful employment. I would be eligible to access my money from the fund. There's what we call the immigration grant. So if you are living in Uganda permanently, if you are a Ugandan currently employed in Uganda today, and then you secure permanent residence of another country, you get a green card, okay, then you'd be eligible to access your savings. Or if you're not a Ugandan, but you're employed in Uganda, your terms in Uganda come to an end, your permit either expires or you apply that it is cancelled because you are returning back home, you equally qualify to access your savings. And then finally is what we call the survivor's benefit. That if a member of the fund passed on today before accessing your savings, then your immediate dependents would qualify to access can even see the numbers here that less than 1% of the people that we pay are the people that are paid under the survivor's benefit, meaning that you have almost 99% chances of accessing your own money before you actually pass on. What that speaks to our membership is that people actually live longer, because the biggest percentage of money that is paid out or even count goes in age benefits. Okay, so that is in as far as benefits are concerned, and the law is very clear on who survivors are, who the dependents are. The law looks at the spouse and the children as your primary dependents in the event that a member of the fund passed on. So, Ronald, we can now move to the next slide. Let's talk about the amendments now. Okay, so just move to the next one, Ronald. Okay, so these are some of the things that in the law. I told you about the definition of an employer who would be eligible to join NSSF. Until Jan last year, you needed to be employing at least 5 people. Now the threshold was dropped. Okay, in the past you needed to have at least 5 people. Now in our new law, every employer, irrespective of the number of employees, is required to register and contribute for your employees. Okay, so every employer, irrespective of the number of employees, under the new law, is meant to register with NSSF and contribute for the people that you employ. So that's a key change. A key change because we've had so many smaller entities, smaller employers under the SME category that in the past did not have to register. If there are any that did, they did so voluntarily. So they would join voluntarily and contribute for their employees. Now that too has now ceased. Okay, so regardless of the size of the enterprise, regardless of the number of employees that you have, you're required as a matter of law to register for your employees. Just move to the next one. But the law also goes ahead to define who an employer is for the purpose of contributing to NSSF, because there have been questions that would the employer include my home where I've got a worker, I've got my house help? Am I now required under this new law to comply even in regard to such people? So the law defines an employer, and it defines an employer to include the following: a company registered or incorporated under the Companies Act of 2012, a partnership registered under the Partnership Act of 2010, a trustee incorporated under the Trustees Incorporation Act 165, a business registered under any other law for the time being in force governing the establishment of businesses. So basically businesses that are registered by the Uganda Registration Services Bureau, would also qualify as employers for the purpose of contributing to NSSF. Extends to the governing body of an unincorporated association. Okay, so this defines who an employer is for the purpose of registering and contributing to NSSF. So if you've got your house help, you are not defined here as one of the employers. People's homes are not included in the definition of employers, so those are excluded. They would only be able to join, but voluntarily. Okay, so that is in as far as employers are concerned. So we can then move. Let's move to the next one. Okay, Ronald. Okay, fine. So the next thing that we can talk about is that the law has also introduced fines and penalties. Okay, if you read sections 43, 44, and 45 of the Principal Act, certain things were amended. The fines were amended. Okay, they were increased. They're now much higher. From 10. Just a moment. So my apologies. So the law talks about things like the penalties. If an employer fails to comply and they accrue arrears, an entity will be penalized by paying 10% of the outstanding areas. So let's imagine your areas are 10 million. For every month that passes, you'll be paying 10% of that amount. But remember that every month in which you penalize, the outstanding amount also goes higher. Okay. There are also penalties and fines to do with things like imprisonment. Okay. So finance that is not compliant, the directors or the owners can be either imprisoned, they can be fined, or they can even serve, both. You can be fined, but also you can be imprisoned. Let's move to the next one in interest of time. So there are a few other things that changed in the law. There's the issue of supervision of the fund, where the Minister of Gender and Labor, as well as the Minister of Finance, are given dual supervision. The law is very specific on who does what in terms of the two. So this plan oversight role, but when it comes to things like appointment of the MD, when it comes to things like constituting the board, when it comes to things like approving the budget, those are with the Minister of Gender and Labor, while investments lie with the Minister of Finance. There was also a change around immigration benefits and also exempted employment benefits. In the old law, there was a requirement that for you to access your savings under immigration grant and exempted employment, you needed to have saved for at least 4 financial years. That was dropped. So regardless of the duration under which a member has contributed, once you're leaving the country permanently, you'll be eligible to take all your savings. There was also a change around the duration under which the managing director and the deputy are appointed on a 5-year contract, renewable once. I've talked about midterm access already, and I've explained the 2 conditions under which it is paid. The other key change in the law is around voluntary savings. We know that the informal sector especially was largely not covered by any scheme. Now, in our law, there is a provision under which individuals that are self-employed, okay, people that have got their own source of income, can elect to voluntarily join and make contributions to the fund. Okay, so that's also quite a key change that is intended to expand the coverage of the fund. The law also gives the board, in consultation with the minister, powers to come up with new products. So we know that especially for the voluntary savers, you cannot hold their savings on the same terms and conditions as a mandatory saver. So the fund is already working on a number of changes that will see introduction of more flexible benefits for the voluntary savers. We would like that people that are saving voluntarily will be given an opportunity to even choose the duration for which they want to save. Some sort of goal-based saving where an individual says, I've got this particular goal, and if I saved for 2 years or 3 years, I'm able to meet that particular goal and I can access whatever money I would have accumulated. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Ronald. Let's talk about obligations of employers. So what are you required to do as an employer to be seen to be complying with provisions of the law? Number one is that you are required to register your entity. So your very first obligation is to ensure that you register your business, you register your company with NSSF for the purpose of contributing. You also meant to ensure that all your employees are registered with NSSF so they can be able to contribute. The other key thing for you to take note is that you meant to make contributions by the 15th day of the month, following the month for which you have paid salary. So we're in April today. Ideally, the contributions for this current month should come into the fund by the 15th of May. When you exceed the 15th of May to pay contributions for the current month, you'd be crossing into the non-compliance line. You also expected to honor payment plans. We appreciate as an entity that despite the requirements being there, many businesses have got cash flow issues. So sometimes they accumulate areas and we get into signing of payment plans. Now, when this payment signed, they're giving you convenience to be able to clear your areas without affecting your business plans. So the expectation under the law is that these payment plans are honored by the entity. The other requirement is that of self-disclosure and assessment. As a contributing employer, you can choose to self-disclose if there are cases of non-compliance. You can choose to undertake a self-assessment. And if you do a self-assessment, you then are exempted from any penalties arising out of any arrears that would come from your self-assessment, because you'd have made the work of the scheme much easier. So my call is that you take advantage of self-assessment. Periodically do an assessment on yourself as an employer. Look at your payrolls, look at what you're paying to URA, look into your files, and just be sure that you're fully compliant. And if you are not and you disclose, you'd only be required to pay whatever outstanding obligation it is without suffering any penalties. The other expectation is that an employer is required to provide documents and to grant access to inspectors of the fund to aid their work. So under the law, NSSF have got certain categories of workers or employees that are given a right of access to different places. So if they come to your place and show you the certificate that entitles them to inspect documents and to access the premises, please grant them access, because if you don't, you'll be blocking the inspectors from undertaking their work. The other expectation is that contributing employers should be filing monthly. Yeah, that even when you don't have the money to pay contributions, at least ensure that you submit a list of the people that you've employed for that particular month and what is due to them, such that even when we go into payment plans, there is a basis upon which we can compute what the outstanding arrears are. So those are really obligations of an employer. But I just want to reiterate that as an institution, we understand that our ability to continue working as NSSF entirely depends on businesses also working. So our interest is not in closing businesses and shutting up businesses, but finding ways in which we can work with businesses to support them to comply. So if you're facing any challenges that make it difficult for you to comply, our request is that you notify the fund, that you write. And we see quite a number of companies that actually write and say, for this particular month, for reasons ABCD, we are unable to remit our contributions. We ask for an extension of this number of days or weeks or months, and we will sit with you and accordingly support you. So that's my call to you, that even when you are facing challenges, please communicate and we'll be able to work with you. Let's move on. Ronald, let's move to the next slide. Okay, so on the next slide is just to look at what constitutes a fully compliant employer. What are some of the conditions that you've got to fulfill to be seen to be complying fully? So like I've indicated earlier, that you're paying contribution by the 15th day of the month, okay? That you are paying for all eligible staff. Now, we get instances of employers who say, this staff is a casual, okay? This staff is on probation, okay? Now, under the NSSF Act, it does not matter even if someone is on probation. As long as you've engaged them and you're paying them a salary during that period, you also meant to pay for them their NSSF for that period. Even if their probation ends and you choose not to engage them, you still ought to have contributed for that period under which they worked for you on probation. The people that many people tend to refer to as casual, but are on your payroll, you're paying them a salary every month, okay? Some even choose to pay them weekly or daily. But these are people that you've engaged on a consistent basis, okay? You're supposed to pay for them. The only people that you easily exclude are individuals that are not your workers per se, but are only called upon as and when there is a particular need for them. So let's imagine I run a school and I do not have on my payroll someone who is meant to maintain the compound, the grass and the flowers. But whenever the things, sort of overgrow, I simply call someone who comes, they slash, I give them their 10,000 and they leave. They are not anywhere in my books. So then such a person is not my employee. If I need to give a talk to my staff on financial literacy, and I invite Ronald to come and deliver that talk on a particular day, and I pay him his 1 million or 4 million, and he goes, then Ronald is not my employee. Okay, he simply come, he's done a particular task that I needed him to do, and I've paid him off. But the other category that you engage on a consistent basis, even if the nature of their work sounds casual, they are your employees and you ought to be contributing for them. The other thing is that you need to pay contributions based on your total emoluments, on the gross pay. So we get instances where an employer says, I'm only paying NSSF on this 1 million, but there's this additional 500,000 that I give you as a facilitation for transport. Now, if you're giving this as a benefit in cash, then the expectation is that it forms part of the gross salary, okay? As long as it's a cash benefit. If it's a benefit in kind, then that is excluded. You don't have to include it when you're computing NSSF. And if it's for things like transport, it's got to be clear. Is it a refund? Is it that I spent my own 100,000 and now you're reimbursing it? Okay. If it's per diem, is it that you simply gave me this per diem to go and do particular work? Because we know that per diems are not computed as part of salary. But the moment you choose to compute these payments as part of your payroll, and I'm receiving them every month, then they are seen to be part of your gross pay. Okay. Then, of course, you also meant to ensure that all your eligible employees are registered. In terms of employees, people have also asked about consultants. If someone is a consultant, they are not your employee. You simply engage them on consultants basis. They do their work, you pay them, and they leave. So those are not seen as your employees. We've also got people that work on commission, especially the salespeople. So they are paid based on the volume of the stuff that they sell or based on the money that they bring in. Those are also not seen as people that you need to be paying for because they are commission based. You cannot anticipate. You can't tell how much you pay them because they are purely based on how much they bring in. But what are some of the benefits of being compliant with the NSSF? Of course, the first one is that you contribute towards a better retirement for your employees. Okay, even when people are working for you today, by being compliant and contributing for them, you directly ensuring that at the time when they retire, they will be retiring decently. They'll have some income that they can live upon when they're retired. Okay, but it also becomes easy for you to obtain a clearance certificate from NSSF if you're compliant. Check that for many businesses and even government, for you to do business, you need to demonstrate that you comply with your statutory obligations, that you're compliant in terms of taxes, also that you're compliant in terms of social security for your workers. So if you're not compliant, find it hard to secure a business, especially with the government. But not only many entities within the NGO world who make that before we give you business, you've got to demonstrate that you care about your employees. And one way to demonstrate that you care about your employees is to pay their NSSF. So that's also another benefit, that you'll be increasing the chances of your enterprise getting business from government and other actors because they are very clear about the rights of employees. It will also help you as a business to avoid penalties. When we audit an employer, let's say for the last 5 years, and we discover areas, usually the biggest amount of what is outstanding is the penalty. So just imagine your areas are only 10 million, but you've got a penalty of 80 million. Why would you suffer penalties that you would ordinarily not have paid had you complied? So it is extremely important that for the secure future of your own business, you do not, fail to comply because you can easily be caught up in penalties. In terms of corporate governance, it's also good for your business. It's good for your enterprise to be seen to be compliant. There will be many people that don't want to be associated with an entity that is not compliant. So corporate governance would also demand that you basically comply. Complying also helps you to avoid unnecessary litigation. One of the work that we're doing almost on an everyday basis is that we're in court with so many entities. Sometimes it's us, NSSF, who have taken them to court when they have adamantly refused to comply. But we've also got many instances where former employees have dragged employers to court. So you think that you're not paying today, and 1 year passes, 4 years, 5 years, and you think that you're safe. 10 years down the road, your former employees can actually take you on. And the NSSF would, of course, be invited as a witness. I recall recently we had a case where employees sued an employer for not meeting their contributions for the years 1998 to 2005. So you can imagine so many years had passed, but employees still came up and said, during this period, you never paid our money. The employer ended up paying a lot more in interest and in penalty than in actual standard contributions. So you can imagine that not being compliant can really throw your business in very big trouble. But above all, you'd also have a motivated staff. If I work for this particular enterprise and I know that you're saving for me so I can secure my old age, why wouldn't I be motivated to work for you longer? If I hear that there's a company that is contributing to NSSF and the one that I work for is not, I would rather work for one that cares about me than one that actually doesn't. And I know that the question always is that when a company is still much smaller, it could be much more expensive to comply. But even when you get bigger, it gets even more complex because then the obligations are bigger, okay? So you'll actually find that it is easier to begin complying when you're still smaller and you gradually grow, okay? I mean, if someone is only earning 100,000, okay, it would mean that your 10% for them is only 10,000 shillings. And then you deduct 5,000 shillings from them, meaning you'll be paying 15,000 shillings. But as your company grows and you're paying bigger salaries, of course, those figures also grow. So if you can't comply as a smaller entity, it will also be impossible or even harder for you to comply as a much bigger entity. So please make it your habit to comply. And if there are challenges, you can always write to the fund and we'll see how best to support you. So let's move to the next one. So the next one is just telling you how do you register. So if you're a member, we've made it extremely convenient. You can go to your phone, you can download the NSSF Go app, and on this app, at your convenience, you can self-register. All you need is your national identification number, okay? And if you're not a Ugandan, all you need is your passport. Key in that one number, your email address and your phone number, and then our system will automatically pick all your data from NERA because we are fully integrated with NERA. You can also use the USSD option. Again, even if you don't have a smartphone and you've got a Kaviri phone, you can still be able to self-register. While for the employer, you can also use the mobile app, but you can also use the web and you're able to register at your convenience, okay? Just visit the employer portal. Let's move, Ronald. Okay, so for the employer, again, you can use the web. All you need is your business registration number, the BRN, or if you don't have one, you can use your TIN. Again, we are fully integrated with URA, we are integrated with URSP, and we can pick all your details. So you don't even need to fill out a long form because once you key in these key numbers, then we can pick your data. But the other alternative is that you can visit one of our branches. We've got about 21 branches countrywide, and they can be able to support you. So that's the last slide. I thought would reserve a lot more time for Q&A. And I think I've been seeing quite a number coming through the chat. But Ronald, over to you now to guide you. Now we'll move forward from here.
Thank you so much, Geoffrey. Clearly from the questions, you notice there are a number of questions, but thank you so much for highlighting. I particularly liked the fact that it's important to appreciate how even being compliant with NSSF actually enhances the business, and a bit of those fundamentals came through And I'm very grateful that that you did that. And certainly a number of us didn't know the changes in the law and the definition of the people who are called the employers according to the NSSF Act. I think there was a lot of chat about the people in our homes and that, so that you have cleared. But I'll give an opportunity. Thank you so much for allowing enough time for the Q&A. I'm going to give an opportunity. There are a number of questions in the chat box, but I'll give an opportunity to people to ask, and then we'll answer some questions in the chat box, and we'll see how far we can go. Stella, you have your hand up. I'll give you the first opportunity, Stella. Please go ahead and ask your question. Make it short, make it precise.
Thank you for the presentation. In areas where there are branches, but you find that people working in organizations where the branches are...
I can barely get Stella. I don't know if it's a network or is it on my side?
Now? Can you
That's
get
a little
now?
better.
Hello?
Breaking,
yes, Stella, I think you are breaking.
Hello, are you now?
Sorry, Stella, I think Stella, you can go ahead and put the message in the chat box, and we'll pick it up. I think if I caught Stella right, she was asking about some people who are working in up-country branches, but possibly she'll write in the chat box and we'll pick it up. I'll go to Silva. Silva, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you, Ronald, and thank you, Geoffrey. I have two questions. One, you talked about who is an employer. So if I am a partner of a firm, am I required to pay NSSF? In an assumption that I'm already paying payee for myself, most probably, but then would that mandate me also to pay my NSSF? Then two, are we having instances where NSSF is already carrying out forced registration of employers? Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Silva. Those are two precise questions. Geoffrey, I think we'll take a couple and then I'll give you an opportunity to answer. Gerald, go ahead, please.
Okay. Thank you so much for this. Now, my question goes to the transparency in NSSF's reports. So we've seen percentages of how the contributions have been paid out, but we would want to know how many people become eligible for whatever category per year, so that we know that, maybe 80% are able to successfully make the claim, and maybe the following have failed. Because in compliance, we would also want to build trust that we are saving with the right entity that is giving back to the employees. The other thing is, I would want to ask, is NSSF regulated by the Uganda Retirement Benefit something, that body? Because it sounds more independent than the government, given the government's history. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ibra, over to you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. My question goes to, there are two questions. Number one, is there a minimum salary or allowance which NSSF should be deducting? Then number two, if it is an NGO and we are giving out some small allowances, in fact, not up to even a minimum payment for payee, is it also subject to NSSF? Thank you so much.
Super, thank you so much. Anita, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much for the presentation. And I have two questions. Number one is, I would like to inquire, for example, if you have employed an independent contractor who is going to work for a specific period of time, these people are not put on the payroll. Do we still have to remit NSSF? And also, in the case that you have got a service provider who is supposed to work for a certain period of time for a project. For example, I work with a construction company, and usually these things come on contract basis or project basis, and we're just employing them for a certain period of time. Do we have to, and they're on service contracts or independent contracts, do we have to remit NSSF? Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Anita, for those questions. I think I'll give Stella one more chance, then we will go. I'll go back to Geoffrey, then we'll have another round. Stella, are you there? All right. Let me go with Otim as the final one, and then we can be able to move. Richard, Otim?
Yes, thank you, Ronald. Thank you, Geoffrey, for the time and the presentation. Mine is a quick one. I have two companies I registered last year in August. One is agribusiness, Mogi Farms Limited. The other one is an engineering consultancy firm. Now, my question is that for the provision under the new NSSF law, the amendments, and then if you look at other relating entity, government entities, URSB, URA, NSSF, the PPDA, they seems to be working in a linked system. Now, there's this requirement, you need to get PPDA certificate, you need to get the NSSF certificate for, let's say, an engineering firm doing consultancy. Now, my question is that if you have just registered, you have gotten the URT number, so you're moving to formalize your engagements with whoever client that will come in. So there's the aspect of that. You're not working full-time, you're probably trying to look at the office establishment, you don't have full-time staff, you're probably employing cleaners, people who are trying to keep up the space. But if, for me to start getting a job, let's say a design consultancy, I need to be cleared by PPD, I need to be cleared by NSSF. How do I manage this kind of situation? And then secondly, if I am working with colleagues, we are an associate, my firm will consult an architect, a quantity surveyor, a structural engineer. So we are doing a one-off, maybe in 6 months. How do we reconcile this aspect? As a company, it's okay to register as an employer, but the question is on the employee aspect, on especially to be compliant. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Geoffrey, I think you could take that round. I see just one final hand. Donald, can you just ask your question quickly so that Geoffrey takes it into this?
Okay. Mine is if my company is a single member company, or perhaps I have 2 directors, but we don't have any other employees that are on the payroll. Do the directors qualify as employees?
All right, super. Thank you so much. Geoffrey, over to you. You possibly will pick up a couple.
In the chat as well, yeah. Okay, thanks. So let me start right out with Silva. If you're a partner, okay, now let me just use the example I think of what, say law firms. So if I'm a partner in a law firm, am I an employee and would I be required to register? So the firm itself is an employer and it should be required to register because most likely it's got employees. But the partners within that particular firm are not necessarily employees, okay? Except for situations that we've seen where some firms pay a salary to their employees. Now, the moment you begin paying a salary to your partners, then you move them into the category of employees, okay? But if I'm a partner in a firm and I am not being given a salary, I only share in the profit, okay, that the firm makes, then I'm not an employee. And for the purpose of NSSF, I would not require to be among the people that that firm is actually paying for. The firm would only be required to pay for its employees, okay? So for silver, I hope that answers you. So as a partner, there will be no strict requirement, except if you as a firm choose to pay salary on a monthly basis to that partner, which we've seen being done by a number of firms, okay? But those that are not paying the partners' salaries, their partners are not required to be registered as employees for that particular firm. They are more like shareholders in the firm. Then Silva talked about forced registration of employers. I'm not sure I got that right. So hopefully there will be an opportunity for him to just explain what he really meant by that. I just didn't get it right. So if Silva is still on the call, he could explain that second bit, but I can as well move to Gerard. Then when I'm done, Silva can always explain that. So Gerard, about the transparency. Yes, Gerard, we're extremely transparent. We publish these numbers. We are required under the law to, publish these numbers. When we have the members annual general meeting every year, these numbers are also displayed. I can already tell you that for this year, we've so far paid over 38,000 members, even before their actual ends. We've paid more than 1 trillion Uganda shillings in benefits, even before their actual ends. So, Gerard, also to explain to you, every eligible member of NSSF who applies is paid. So there is nothing like there are those who fail. Those who fail are people that are not yet eligible. So we get also claims from individuals that have not yet met the requirement. And of course, we can't pay you until when you've met the requirement. But all individuals that meet the requirements set out in the law are paid their benefit. Okay? So there is nothing like those that are paid against the total that applied, because every eligible member who makes an application actually gets paid. This year, we are most likely going to pay about 47,000 by the time June comes. And we project in total that we'll have paid about 1.2 trillion Uganda shillings. Already 1T has been paid. So we are as transparent as you can ever get. Gerard also says that we're regulated by UBRA. Yes, we are fully regulated by UBRA, the Uganda Retirement Benefits Regulatory Authority. The government, and by government, I'm talking about the Minister of Gender and Labor and the Minister of Finance, only play what you call an oversight role. But in terms of strict regulation of the activities, of the operations of the scheme, we are regulated by UBRA, and UBRA undertakes audits to confirm that the fund is compliant with all the requirements of the law. Then Ibra was asking about the minimum salary. Ibra, there is no minimum salary for you to register and contribute to NSSF. Minimum salary only applies for tax purposes, because for URA, there is a threshold in terms of taxable amount. Okay, I know that if you're earning, I think, less than 300,000, then you don't, pay PAYE. While for NSSF, regardless of your salary, regardless of its amount, you are still required to pay. So even if you're earning 100,000 shillings only, you still contribute the 5,000, and your employer would contribute for you the 10,000. Even if you're only earning 50,000 shillings a month, you still contribute as an employer the 10%, which would be 5,000 shillings, and the employer would contribute the 5%, which would be 2,500. So for purposes of pension, there is no minimum, salary, because what is good for a person that is earning 10 million is good for a person that is earning 100K. And by the way, this money, because pension schemes by nature are long term, even what seems to be little today, when you apply the fact that interest is compounded over the years, that money can actually grow. If a person is earning less than 100,000 shillings, and after they have served for 20 plus years, they are being paid 10 million or 30 million. For that person who is earning only 100,000, that is still, quite some good money. So there is no minimum salary. Then Ibra does ask about the NGO world. If you're paying small allowances, how do you compute and pay them? Now, Ibra, the key thing is not whether the allowances are small or big. The key thing is, how do you define these allowances, and how are you paying these allowances? Like I gave an example earlier. If I use a motorcycle in the field and every time I'm in the field, I am using my own money for fuel, and you're funding my 50K, then that is a refund. And that refund ordinarily would not be coming through your payroll. But the moment you make any payment in cash and it's coming through your payroll, then it becomes part of someone's salary. Okay? I'll tell you that where I work here, there is a category of employees. Just a moment, I've lost something here. Oh, just forgive me, just a moment. Okay, so I think as answering Ibra in terms of the allowances. So it is how you pay them. At my workplace, we pay what we call mileage. We give a certain category of staff, okay, some money every month to enable them to do their field work, basically to fuel their cars and all that. But that money goes through their payroll. We pay it at the end of month. And so it is seen as a cash benefit. And they pay tax on it as well. They also pay NSSF on that money. So these allowances depends on how you treat them and how you actually pay them. If it is a refund and it is very clear that it is a refund, then you cannot include that in terms of computing NSSF. ANITA, independent contractors, not on your payroll, service providers, projects that are temporary service contracts. ANITA ordinarily would not expect that you contributing for your contractors. No. The contractors in their own right are employers. So if you get a contractor to do for you certain work, that contractor is also an employer in their own right. So the requirement for compliance would not be on you who is getting this contractor, but rather on the contractor as an entity. So if you got the contractor to undertake some work for you, we will not require that you got the contractor pays NSSF for those employees. Those employees are a responsibility of the contractor, okay? The same would apply if you get a service provider. So let's imagine you get a service provider to give you food for 1 week or for 7 months, okay? Or you have a workshop and you get a service provider to provide certain things specific for that purpose. Again, service providers are not your employees. Service providers in their own right are employers. So we'll be treating them as entities independent of the primary employer. So you're not required, ANITA, to pay NSSF for your contractors, for your service providers, because in their own right, they are employers who should be meeting their own obligations to NSSF. For you, your requirement is restricted to your employees, okay? Then we move to Richard Otim, who says he's got 2 companies, one in agri, one is in engineering, but requires a certificate. Richard, I get your frustrations. And yes, it is true that you can start a company today, but it takes time for you to make that company operational. So if you don't have employees, we cannot expect you to be paying NSSF. I'll tell you, and I'll give an example for the oil sector. Last year, we cleared over 1,000 entities that wanted to join the supplier list. And the Petroleum Authority required that before you join the supplier list, you must bring a clearance certificate from NSSF. But remember, all these 1,000 plus entities are not yet operational. They don't have employees. They don't even have offices. They're not employing anyone. So, but they came to NSSF and applied for a clearance. And when you are applying, you simply tell us that, look, I am new, I have no employees, I have no address, but I'm intending to begin business in ABCDY, and we shall clear you. The clearance will basically be saying that for the moment, you don't have any obligations to NSSF because you've not yet started engaging employees. Okay, I hope that answers your query, Richard. So even when you don't have employees, you can still get a clearance from NSSF stating strictly that you have no obligations at the moment. But when you say that you've got only cleaners, then the cleaners are employees. Okay, cleaners are not casual people like some people want to call them. A cleaner is doing work that is consistently being done for your company. They must report every day to clean, and you are paying them a salary. So even someone that you're calling a cleaner would qualify to be your employee. But if you don't have any employees, you've not started, you'd still be eligible to be given a clearance. So please just apply and you'll get one. Richard also talks about associates and colleagues undertaking a one-off assignment. For me to be able to answer that, I would need to look at the details really. Because if we gather and we're undertaking a one-off assignment, but we don't have employees to undertake that assignment, we are taking that assignment as partners and there is no salary payment, then NSSF would not come in. But if for the purpose of executing that assignment, even if it is temporary, you recruit people as your employees to execute that, temporary work, you'd still be required to pay for those employees, okay? So for us to be able to guide you well, we'll need to sit with you and look at the details, because it might be that you are not actually required, but it could also be that if you've got employees for that purpose, they could be a requirement. Then Donald says if it's a single member company and they've got no employees, they're only directors. Do the directors actually pay NSSF? Are they required? So Donald, it's a yes or no answer. No, if these directors are not earning a salary. But we've gotten situations, and I think I explained it earlier, where some companies choose to give a salary to their directors every month, in which case they begin to meet the definition of an employee. So if your directors appear on your payroll, then you're required to pay for them in NSSF because you've chosen to categorize them as employees. But if your directors do not earn salary, they are only earning sitting allowances as and when the board sits, okay? They are only earning, a retainer, and you've defined it as a retainer but not as salary. Then you're not required under the law to be paying NSSF for your directors. But we've seen companies where directors are within their payroll and they are being given a salary like any other employee. So to that extent, you'd pay for them. But if they don't meet those conditions, then you don't have to pay for them. So Ronald, those were the questions. I think let's go to the chat a bit and address whatever hasn't been addressed. So if there's anything in the chat and was already asked, I'll skip that.
Yeah.
In interest of time, so let me just go to this.
I think I could also give Silva an opportunity to clarify his question. You had asked him to clarify as you check the chat.
Yeah. Okay, Silva, over to you.
Thank you, Ronald, once again. Geoffrey, what I was asking about, I run an audit firm. I am a partner in an audit firm. And before the notes came out, the NSSF notes came out, I received an email in the inbox where the firm had been registered for NSSF and even indicated an NSSF number. I had not applied. So that's why you generated my basis for the question. Are we already into that window where for any reason NSSF is carrying out first amendment for any employers? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I get it. Now, because we are largely integrated with other government agencies like URA, like URSB, we are now in a position to auto-register entities that have not yet come on board. And if that firm of yours has got employees, then ideally, you should really be on board. But if that firm doesn't have employees completely, and there is no evidence to contradict that, then you can simply write back and we can deactivate that particular registration. Okay, I hope that answers you. So let me go to the chat a bit. I think the first came from Emma, talking about investment associate, practitioners of contemporary philosophy limited, dealing in consultants. And I kind of, I think he was only introducing himself. There are questions from Margaret Nalwoga on mid-term benefit rate. So Margaret, mid-term is in two categories. There is a category for persons living with disabilities, the PWDs, okay? For these individuals, the rate is 50%. So if they are 40 years of age and they have contributed for 10 years and they are confirmed as persons living with disabilities, then they can access up to 50% of their savings. Then for the rest of the members, if you are 45 years of age and you've contributed for 10 years, then you access up 20% of your savings. So that is the rate. Then second question from Margaret, at one point last year, there were news about using our NSSF savings to access housing loans, real estate, any updates? Now, Margaret, the regulator, UMBRA, issued some guidelines last year that would in essence permit members of pension schemes to use up 50% of their savings with the NS scheme as collateral in order for them to get loans, specifically to acquire, housing. I know that on the side of NSSF, that is not yet possible because there is a provision in our law that makes it impossible for your money to be attached. Yet, from the guidelines issued by the regulator, if you defaulted, then the financial institution can recover the equivalent of up to 50% of your money from the scheme in the case of default. So what is happening today is that there is some arrangement for the fund to work with the regulator to undertake an amendment of our act in order for that provision to work. So until the act is amended, we cannot do that because right now your monies cannot be attached by a financial institution. So that's not yet happening. Survivors benefit, elaborate on eligibility. In-laws seem to be benefiting more from survivors benefit than the spouses and children. How can illiterate spouses and minors be helped? Now, we draw largely from the Succession Act. If a member of the scheme passes on today, the primary dependents are the spouse and the children, not your in-laws. So it is your spouse and your children. In fact, the law is very clear that your spouse would gain up to 15% of your savings, while the children would qualify to take 85% of savings. But in any case, we usually pay all the money to the spouse for the benefit of the children, except in cases where some children specifically ask that their portion of the saving is not given to their mother or their father. But ordinarily, the beneficiaries are spouse and children. And in our data, okay, most of the payments that are made in survivors benefit actually go to the spouse and the children. It is in very rare cases where other people come in. And in absence of the spouse and the children, then the law talks about your biological parents, okay? So that is in as far as survivors benefit is concerned.
Geoffrey, I think I'll also give an opportunity to Kevin, Esther, and Charles, and then we could possibly integrate also the other questions in the chat as you go.
Okay, so
Kevin,
do they have now? Okay.
Yes, Kevin, please come through and ask your question.
Hello, I have a question still in relation to the directors.
We can hardly hear Kevin.
Hello?
Maybe she's far from a gadget. Okay, that's better now.
Okay, so I still have a question on directors. So if, like, for example, a role has been described as managing director or executive director, is there a provision that actually defines what a director is? Because on the pay side, they'll typically say one person should be in charge of the company, and because with URA, you'll have a director registered, they'll typically want that person to earn something. So is it possible that this person could earn something for the purposes of compliance of URA, but not necessarily meet NSSF? And you have mentioned something that if you actually, in fact, put it as a retainer, that probably might not be defined as a salary. So I just need clarifications on those questions, because I think at the moment, the challenge that do not have physical presence, physical presence in Uganda, is that we are getting forced to actually put local Ugandan directors for the purpose of compliance. And maybe it's a question of, should I actually come to you to seek this clarification? Okay. Because it's a couple of questions.
All right, thank you, Kevin. I think, Kevin, I wanted you to clarify a bit on the bit about having to employ a Ugandan director. Is it for a company which is coming from outside, incorporated in Uganda, or also for local companies? I don't know whether you can clarify that in your question.
Yeah, so it is for companies incorporated in Uganda.
Okay. All right. I hope you have captured that, Geoffrey. I'll ask Esther to come.
Yes,
Esther, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, sir. I needed to clarify on my question. Now, we are a distribution company, and the rest of the other people who do the paperwork are directors, so they don't get any pay. The only person who is 100% at the warehouse is a security person who was the founder of the company. So Revenue Authority comes one day and finds these loaders carrying items and banks the company with an assessment and says, now that you're paying taxes, you also need to pay as you earn. And we don't have actually full-time employees. These people just come and load, they get their 3,000 per day, but where we had to oblige. So we put them in a payroll, and with their 3,000 per day, as and when they come, we totaled it up and we paid the tax. Now NSSF has come in. I'm lost as to how to treat these particular people because they are not consistent. They are just people who come in every day and appear and then come do their work and they go away. Even the taxes we are paying as pay as you earn, we're meeting as a company. Now that means we're going to have to pay the 15% because NSSF aligns the return of pay as you earn to NSSF. So I need to understand how do we go about this? Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, Esther. And finally, Charles.
Okay, thank you so much. Mine is also simple, somehow relating to the one of Esther. There is a consultancy firm. It doesn't have permanent employees. When you get people wanting you to train them in a given field, you look out to people you think could be better in that field, and you reach out to them. They go and train, and that is maybe once in 2 months, once in a month, and then like the sequence follows. And then they are not permanent. This time you get this one, the other day you get this one. Okay, a few times you may repeat the same people if it is the same topic. So how do you treat that now to you in terms of NSSF, to you, the director, but also to those people? Because at the end of the day, you're going to pay them some commission, but they are not permanent staffs.
Okay.
How do I treat that?
Thank you.
And we'll have a final one from Mwami Zinunula, and then we'll get back to Geoffrey.
Thank you very much, Ronald. Do you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, and thank you very much, sir, for the presentation. I've got a question and a comment. In growing enterprise, there are sometimes we've advised people who are starting out to allocate a salary, even if they are not able to pay it, so that the person, that the managing director or the managing partner, does put in the sweat capital, and before the company makes money, makes profit, before it becomes profitable, we advise that they should still pencil it in, such that 2 years later, you could find that this person qualifies for arrears that they were not able to be paid at the time. My question is, how should that be treated? Do they need to come in and write a future payment plan? Should it be that they are able to pay it, but in portions which are quite small? And this does go to NSSF, but of course it will also apply to URA. I would like to be clarified on how that should be handled. But the comment I have is to encourage all of us. I have been in this business for over 15 years, stayed small. I don't employ people on a permanent basis as such, but I realize that if we want to grow, we do need earlier than later to comply, to become competitive, to become even presentable at all. If you're to bid for anything, there are certain things that are not our wars that we shouldn't fight. So I would say it is a good thing for us to take the attitude that let us go and comply wherever we can comply. Let us go and be as formal as possible wherever we can be formal. And balance that with the fact that we do not want to lose money, of course. So we shouldn't look at it like it's enforcement. We should look at it like it's compliance, which are not exactly the same thing. And compliance is very, very good for us if ultimately we are to grow. Recently, I was looking to get a partner in Turkey, and they want this, they want this, they want this. And these are normal things that we should have. But because I've not been looking at them formally, eventually we end up remaining rather small. And maybe the other thing is that we should look at it that way. The people who are earning a little money every month, 150, 200,000, we have been in a setting, a social setting, where we, those who seem to have something, the NSSF of our villages, of the people we employ. We need to change that. The way the world is going, we can no longer be able to be the people who buy the coffin and so I would say, let's look at it from that side. If possible, even throw in insurance and do NSSF and lay it all out in our projections. And that way we can talk with the revenue authority, we can talk with NSSF, we can talk with all the bodies that matter and aim to become formal and competitive and get bigger. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sam. Geoffrey,
okay.
I'll hand back to you, sir. Yes.
Okay, so beginning with Kevin. Now, this question of director, when she talks of a managing director or an executive director, I think I need to clarify a few things. First of all, it's not true that for any payment that attracts payee, URA, that it must, as a matter of law, attract NSSF. It's not true. It depends on what that payment is. But number two, when we're speaking directors, we're talking board members, really. Board members. So if you've got a board of directors and they're being paid a retainer, okay, they are not required under the law to contribute to NSSF, except if you choose to do it voluntarily. But when you talk of an executive director, a managing director, those are seen as employees. Your managing director is being paid a salary. Your ED is being paid a salary. Of course, you also have cases where your MD or your ED is also a member of the board, okay? So his retainer or her retainer would not attract NSSF. It is only the salary that would attract NSSF. So that's the question of the directors. But in any case, Kevin, if you're in doubt, you can also come and we sit down and look at the details, and then we can advise you, better. Okay. Then Esther talks about directors still. She gives an example of warehouse where they had loaders. Now, again, because I'm not looking at the specific facts here, my advice might not be completely binding. What I know is that if I'm dealing in a particular business and maybe I bring maize from somewhere and I randomly call some fellows that do offloading come and offload and they go and I pay them their 5K per person, those are not my employees per se. Okay, they are not my employees and I would not have to pay for them NSSF. I would only enter the space of NSSF if these people are actually covered in my payrolls. Meaning, I am using the same people month in, month out. So just imagine a situation where these loaders worked for you for 10 years consistently, and you didn't pay for them because you say they're just some loader. But this one sees as being a random fellow. You have them on your payroll. You are maybe even paying them, every month for the work that they are doing. But if these are random people that are not necessarily people that you have on your books, then those are not your employees. And you do not have to pay for them in NSSF, except if you're doing so voluntarily. But again, like I said, I don't have the advantage of perusing the facts, because we've also seen employers who deliberately define employees differently in order to deny them NSSF. But when you go into their contracts, when you look at their letters, you discover these are actually employees who are simply being given another name for the purpose of dodging NSSF. So again, Esther, if there is a way we can help, I sit at Workers House on the 13th floor. We can always meet and talk and give you better, guidance. Then Charles, the consultants firm that has got no permanent employees, where you reach out to trainers and they do their work and you pay them. I'm going to explain this in two ways. Number one, when it comes to NSSF, there is no such a thing as permanent or non-permanent employees. No. Even if you engage me for 1 month only and you pay me a salary in that 1 month, you ought to have paid my NSSF for that period. So NSSF does not talk about permanent or non-permanent employees. But Charles, for your example of trainers, I happen sometimes to even do some trainings myself. So people will call you, you can deliver a training on their behalf, and you send them your invoice and they pay you your 1 million. You're not their employee, and they don't need to pay NSSF for you. Okay. So again, Charles, it would depend on how you engage these people and how you pay them. So if you're engaging them on consultants basis, or if you're engaging them as and when there is a training that they need to deliver, and they are not your employees, so they come and train and they give you an invoice and you pay them for a service that they are provided. Okay. But if they come and you take them on as if they are your employees and you therefore are paying them a salary, then they are your employees. Okay. So how are you paying them? Okay. If they come and deliver their training and they invoice you and you pay off that invoice, then those are not your employees. Okay. And therefore you don't have to be paying NSSF for them. Then there was this question of allocating a salary if you're unable to pay, and how do you treat this? Do we give payment plans? Of course, the moment you pay salary, the requirement is that you must pay NSSF, okay, for that employee that that you paid for. If for some reason you've accumulated those areas, NSSF is very flexible. We sit down with you, we look at your income, and we draw a payment plan that is consistent with your level of income. A payment plan that is convenient for you to pay your areas without antagonizing your ability to meet your current obligations. So we sign payment plans with so many companies. So if you have a challenge of this nature, yes, we can always sign a payment plan that is convenient for the entity. But I also like to appreciate the comment that you made that sometimes it's better to try your best to comply from the word go, because you might lose certain business opportunities on things that you could have done earlier. One time I was advising a company, a startup, they were having less than 5 employees. And back then, it was not even a strict requirement under the law. But the guy was saying, I would be saving my company some money. We sat down and looked. He was only required for about 100,000 per month to NSSF. But the benefit of him even having done it earlier, okay, were good for the business, because he's able to attract certain people to invest in the business, because the business has been able to demonstrate that it is responsible, that it is compliant, even in cases where it is not strictly required to comply. Okay, so maybe going back into the charts a bit, I think most of the questions that I answered were asked by Margaret. How can employers of a startup deal with NSSF at the time of liquidity challenges? Yes, we recognize that there will be times where cash flow is an issue. The best you can do is to come to NSSF and let us know, okay? So you can file, but pay later. At least we need to know that you file. But even when you file, at least write a letter and say, yes, I have filed for this particular month, but for reasons ABC, I'm unable to pay. I request an extension up to this period. Because if you don't, our system today runs what we call auto penalty. Every time the following month ends, the system automatically computes a penalty. But if you've communicated, we can then be able to easily write off the penalty. Then someone says, can they get a link to the new amendment? I think these amendments should be there on the NSSF website. I need to check, but that should be public information, really. Then Amit Kumar says we are a member scheme, but no investments are done in SME members. How can SMEs benefit by attracting NSSF as an investor in their business? Now, because we keep members' money at the end of the day, we only invest once a business has demonstrated that, first of all, it is very compliant with everything that it needs to comply with. They have kept books, and that even if they were to list, for the purpose of people buying shares, they would meet most of the requirements. We've made this many times public, okay? We also run things like the High Innovator with the MasterCard Foundation, where we've been able to fund a number of startups, more than actually in total now, more than 200 startups. The last cohort that we funded were those that were fully owned by women, okay? But for you to be able to attract NSSF to invest, like one of the members here said, you need, first of all, to be compliant. You need to keep books, okay? And when we come out and advertise opportunities, you need to apply. Of course, the criteria is a bit high because we mostly invest in listed companies, because then there you are very certain that you are securing the funds of the members, okay? We are building houses only for the, I think you meant for the rich and not for the members. Again, like I indicated, some of the houses that we're building, Lubowa may be high end, and you're very right, but we're building Temangalo. If you recall at the launch, we said that the lowest house will cost in the region of 90 million, okay? So there will be 90 million, there will be 100 something million, 200, 300. So Temangalo is not as high as Lubowa, but at the same time, not every member of the scheme is interested in a house. So our obligation to the member is the return. So if we can build some houses, even if they are quite high end, and we're able to sell them at a premium price, it goes directly into being able to give a member a return that is decent enough, that even if you've not given me a house, because it may not be my need or I may not afford it, have you given me a return that is good enough on my money, okay? Now, Kumar, again, members having the right to know about investments and all information about the scheme. We are required under the law to publicize this information. If you go to our website, every year when audits are done, NSSF is fully audited, okay? And we reveal this data to the public. So you can check the website and you'll see all manner of information. But we also invite members to the annual general meeting, in which we give all information about the performance of the scheme, including investments. NSSF wants to force every person to save with them when there is no trust in their leadership or officers. I think the other key factor to consider is that there will be challenges in every institution, including NSSF, okay? Those challenges do not take away the mandate of the institution, okay? Those challenges do not take away the fact that when people save their money and it is invested and they qualify to get it, they actually get their money. So challenges notwithstanding, I think we still have an obligation to undertake under the law, and we'll continue to undertake that obligation. Who is unemployed? As the director of a single, I think I answered a lot around directors, so I will leave that. If I voluntarily join NSSF, can I get my money after a certain period? This is a very good question from Bossa. So Bossa, right now what we are working on are regulations for voluntary savers. We are hoping that before end of this year, we'll come out to the market and give you the product that would have come up with the voluntary savers. But you're right, what we are looking at is to give members an opportunity to select the period for which they want to save. Of course, we will set a minimum because you want also to be able to invest and add some value on the savings of the member. So there will be a minimum. It can be 2 years, it can be maybe 3 years, but a member will then choose how much longer do I want to save. And at the end of the period that you've chosen, you can gain access to your money. So we will not handle voluntary savers the same way as the mandatory savers. If I registered as an individual, not as an employer, are there penalties for the period I didn't pay? No, there are no penalties for individuals, okay? Because individuals, it is purely voluntary, and we cannot penalize you because you are doing so voluntarily. Donald, a company with 2 directors without employees, I think I answered that. What percentage of voluntary members entitled to pay? Voluntary members determine how much they pay, okay? The only thing we have is a minimum. Currently, it is 5,000 shillings, but it is being moved to, I think, about 10,000, you know, as the minimum. But you choose how much to pay. It's not an issue of percentages. What about if my employees are online and from other countries other than Uganda? You could be talking about platform-based workers. So right, we don't have legislation on how to cover platform workers. If I work for, I mean, if I'm on Uber, am I an employee or not? I know that there was a ruling some time back in the UK to the effect that court ruled that Uber drivers should be seen as employees of Uber. Has that been implemented here? No. So we're unable at the moment to track, you know, platform workers, online workers, except if you yourself choose really to reveal them and comply. But if they're also not based here and you're complying in the countries where they are based, then you are still also being, you are covering your obligation. Do directors older than 70 years need to contribute? I've extensively answered of directors, and if you're, you know, referring to board directors, no. If you're referring to your other directors, no, because it is up to 55 years of age. When do they get back their benefit? I talked about the benefits. At what point is withholding tax on interest applied? I'm not sure that was meant for NSSF. Maybe that is really meant for URA. How does NSSF plan to train small SME on monitoring their benefits? Some have no emails, smartphones, do not know how to check the system. Like I indicated in the presentation, even feature phones, people are able to use and monitor their savings. We also send out monthly emails whenever money hits your account. So yes, we are aware of this challenge, and we're trying to come up with solutions that address even individuals that do not necessarily have a smartphone. And Anita is talking to us. Anita, I recall answer. HK, what is the effective date for compliance under the new law? So under the new law, 2 things. One, for companies employing less than 5 employees, the moment the law was assented to in January 2022, then they needed to begin complying from that date onwards. So the effective date is 7th Jan when it was gazetted. The president assented on the 2nd of Jan. You know, then they gazetted that law on the 7th of Jan. So from that moment onwards, the expectation is that your remittances for Feb of 2022 ought to have factored this in. But for companies that were already employing more than 5 people, for you, this has been on for long, from 1985. So for those that have more than 5 people, even by last year, Jan, you still had more than 5 people and you're not compliant, we can go back as far as when your company began. But for those with less than 5 people, or if you had less than 5 people, then your obligations only begin from last year. But in terms of going forward, you need to ensure that by the 15th of the following month, your contributions have come in. I think, how does this, okay. If you didn't include your spouse on the beneficiaries, can I claim when I have a marriage certificate? Absolutely, okay. So yes, we know that there are members that didn't include their spouses, but we encourage you that you can go to the mobile app using your phone and update these details. Please register your spouse, register your children, it makes it easier, okay? But even if you hadn't, we conduct a thorough verification. But my encouragement to you is please update. Then Esther talk about employees that work per hour and when the need arises. I think I talked about that. Esther, I must have answered you. Doreen talking about a side hustle that is registered, but I'm also employed somewhere where my NSSF is paid. Where I have to register and also pay NSSF under my side hustle. So Doreen, if your side hustle meets the criteria and definition of an employer, then you also register that side hustle as an employer, especially if you are employing people, okay? If you're not employing people and you're employing yourself, then you become the employee, okay? So for as long as the side hustle is an employer as defined in the law, then you register your side hustle because it is an employer, it is employing people, it is paying them salary, it should be contributing to NSSF. Independent contractors, I guess I talked about that, Anita. How do I file for NSSF returns? Now there's an employer portal that you can access even via the website, and that portal guides you on how you can file every month, whether you have money to pay or not. Minimum salary, we answered that, Mabel. If your work is part-time but used consistently, I think I answered that. Even if I'm part-time, your obligation is restricted to that time when you engaged me. Employees that have no national IDs, it takes like 6 months for one to get an ID. Yes, unfortunately, we are unable to register Ugandans that don't have national IDs, but we've got a partnership with NERA. So if you're facing challenges, we can even organize a camp fully paid by NSSF. We get our people from NERA, we come to your premises and we register all your employees with NERA, okay, in the convenience of your office. So we can be able to support you. Of course, if there is a sizable, number of people that we need to support. Shiba, we opened up a company, and after 6 months, business went down. We aren't earning, so how do we keep filing? You do zero filing. You can just indicate that for this particular month, there were no employees and the salary is also at zero, okay? So we do not expect you to pay NSSF for a period where, first of all, you are not making any money, and two, you are not paying anyone's salary. NSSF only becomes payable if you are also paying people salary. How do we check for accumulated amount online? How can I get a monthly message when I file and as an individual? So again, when you go to the employer portal and you have your credentials as an employer, you can be able to see your outstanding obligation, especially in terms of penalty. But for you to see what is outstanding, we need to conduct a thorough audit, and we're able to advise you. You can even do an audit on yourself, okay? How do you register employees? I talked about that in the presentation. You can do it on the app, okay, both mobile and web, in the convenience of your home or your office. Employees that work where they're not in NSSF centers, I think we might not answer each and every question probably.
I think interestingly, the questions are still coming through, Geoffrey. So what I thought we could do with Apollo is we're going to compile these questions, and we could have a frequently asked question list, which your team can respond to, and we'll share it on the mailing list of the participants. However, I just wanted you to possibly use the next 2 minutes to summarize this. I think clearly you can see the yearning for people to learn more about how this is done. You mentioned the change of law is that there are some of us who even had more than 5 employees who were not complying even before the new law. So I just wanted you to sum up, and possibly, I know you have a big team which you work with in the different branches. You could just quickly direct us how we can be able to get more there. But I think for me, Shiba's comment summarizes this. It has been eye-opening. So Geoffrey, just help us summarize that, and then we can get there.
Okay, so thank you so much, Ronnie, for giving us the opportunity. I think for me, the closing remarks are that we need to comply. and we need to do so right away. If there are challenges, we will support you as NSSF, because our interest is that you survive as a business, because if you don't, then we cannot attract new members. We've got a big, network across the country. There's a branch in every major town. So please, if you need more information, reach out. Okay, reach out to your RM, reach out to your branches, and I'll give you all the support that you need. The questions that we're unable to answer, let's pick them and answer, and hopefully Ronald will have the way to, send them to you. So thank you so much, and have a good day.
Great, super. Thank you so much. Clearly, this is a session which we may need another one to kind of even get deeper. There are so many questions in the chat box. We have had a very good turn up for the session, and it's a good response. It is it's a vote of confidence on the fund. People want to learn and see how to be able to comply. And for us at Enterprise Uganda, we know that for businesses to win, you, the entrepreneurs, you need to make sure that you're complying with the laws of the country, both the taxman, with NSSF, with the Registration Services Bureau. And we do know that this can be one of the daunting tasks which you have as entrepreneurs. So Geoffrey, thank you so much for opening our eyes on this session. I want to also thank Apollo, who helped us set up this call. Apollo, we will work together to just answer as many questions as possible. We'll make a Word document to just make sure we get quick responses there, and possibly even share the links. Also, I want to mention here that NSSF has a very strong social media engagement. You can engage them on their Twitter handle, on their Facebook page, on all the other platforms. There is also a very big financial literacy program, which I know a number of you have participated. I don't know, Apollo, whether you want to just, for 1 minute, just mention how people can access the financial literacy programs, and then we will see how to be able to take this forward. Apollo, just take a minute and do that.
Thank you, Ronald. Just to let you know, just as Geoffrey has said, using any of the branch networks, going to our website, coming to us directly, our numbers up. I am on that group of the. My apologies.
Looks like we've lost Apollo.
Oh, well, I think I'll certainly share. I'm going to ask my team to share the links on our mailing list so that we can be able to get in touch. Geoffrey, thank you so much. We're very honored you have taken off 2 hours of your time to kind of help us on this journey. And I think on behalf of the entrepreneurs on the call, I want to say a big thank you to the fund and the entire leadership team. Say thank you to them for us. And we look forward to seeing our businesses grow, seeing them create jobs, seeing employees who enjoy working with their employers. Thank you so much, everyone who has joined us. A big thank you. We'll be back next week, Thursday, still at 9 o'clock, and we will be able to be discussing. I think next week we'll be talking about how we can access opportunities in the petroleum space. But we look forward to seeing all of you next week. Thank you so much and have a blessed week.
Great, thank you too.